Okay, we talked about slope being found using the slope formula yesterday, and that was a brute force way of finding slope because it required algebra. For today, we're talking about finding slope from graphs and tables, which makes it more visual for those who get to see how it's moving on the graph from left to right, or how it's increasing or decreasing from left to right on the actual table itself. So slope, written as a fraction that we're going to be using here, is rise over run. This is something that you've heard before. This isn't really anything new. It's just a review and an extension. So the best way to understand how slope works is to look at this little word bubble up here. It puts it in a more physical or a more real world way, but in order for you to be in the track meet, you have to rise before you run. You can't be running while you're laying down. So to find the slope, you need to use rise, which means is it going up or is it going down? And then we should typically always go to the right, unless we're working in inverses. So we need to see how far we're going up or going down, and then how far we're going to the left or to the right, depending on that. So and typically we keep the negative with the numerator. So if you need to know that, we'll write that out to the side. Usually keeps negative. We read a book the same way we read a graph. We read it from left to right. That's also how we do rise over run. So we start on the left and rise, then run right. So we start on the left and rise, which means start on the leftmost point, and then we run to the right. Always simplify completely. This is just something that always has to be done, which means check in the calculator. So if I'm looking at example 1, I need to start at my leftmost coordinate. Can you tell me what coordinate that point is? -2. -2, -5. So which means I'm starting right down here at -2, -5. From this point, I'm trying to reach this point. So do I have to rise upward or rise downward? From this point to that point? Up, because you have to start from which direction? The leftmost point. And then from there, how do I get to that point from this corner? What direction do I have to go to? The right. So we can't just stop here. This is what you call a slope triangle. Does that phrase sound familiar? It was on the vocab. It's a right triangle used on a graph in order to determine the distance between the points. So we have to then come back to this point and count how many blocks we had to go up. So do it along with me, because some people struggle with this. Jordan, stop coloring and focus on the actual problem that we're doing. Insubordination is easy when you don't know what you're doing, but you're choosing to be ignorant right now as opposed to listening to the lesson. Do I make myself clear? Thank you. Stop wasting my time and yours. From here, count with me. 1, 2, keep going. Starting back here. 1, because you count away from it. So count with me. 1, then. So I went up by 8, so this distance is a +8. Then from this corner, I count away to that point. So you count, I'll point. So what's the distance here? Plus 4, because I went to the right. So my rise was a positive 8, and my run was a positive 4. I write this now as 8 over 4. And I need to check this in the calculator. So type in 8 divided by 4. Don't say anything yet, just type it in, I'll tell you when. Did everybody get a chance to type it in? What'd you get? So that would actually be my slope. The goal behind this is that this too is the simplified version of what we just did. So if I started from this point, if I went up 2 to the right 2, do I see a triangle where it's hitting the line? And if I continued that, did I see another triangle? If I just keep going, do each of those triangles lie against the line? That's how I know that this is the correct simplified version of this slope. Any questions? I would recommend drawing in those smaller triangles. That way you know where it's coming from. Those come from there. I'll take a second while y'all are drawing those in. Everybody good? Okay. Let's look at example number 2. Remember, we start on which side? The left side, the leftmost point. So what is the coordinates for the leftmost point? Negative 2 and 3. So that's where we're starting. To get to my next point, do I have to rise upward or rise downward? Down. And I go to where the point actually is. From this corner, what direction do I need to go into to meet my point? The right again. So from this point, I'm going to point and you count, okay? So what kind of 8 would need to go here? A negative 8. From this corner, you're going to count while I point, okay? So what kind of 4 is that? A positive 4, because you're still going in the right direction, right? So if we go to the right, we're going to be gaining, we're going to be growing, we're going to get bigger. So it's going to be a positive 4 in that case. So what was my rise? What was my run? So how would I write rise over run here? I need to then plug this in. So type that in for me, I'll tell you when. Stefan, make sure you're typing in along with this, baby. It'd be different. This is review. It's a lesson, so going through it. And y'all need good things to study and practice with. The vocabulary quiz told me some people have not been studying. We're talking zeros, under 50s on the vocabulary quiz. Let me just say this, there was a lot more people who were in here who did not pass it than those who did. So we really need to zero in, because you need to do better, because you have a concept quiz next Thursday on these topics that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. So, did this simplify into negative 2? Because you're dividing, not subtracting. So, this negative 2 is shown if I start here and go down and 1 to the right. Do I see a triangle that hits? If I go from that point down 2 and 1 to the right, do I see another triangle? If I continue that, will every triangle hit that actual line? That's how I know that this is true. So from here to here, we can say simplify. From here to here, we can say simplify. Any questions there? It says, why is the slope on example 1 positive and the slope on example 2 negative? Well, how would you describe the line? What is the line doing in example 1? What's it doing from left to right? It's going up. There we go. So let's write that. So the line is going up. And how would we describe the line for example 2? It's going down. I'm going to highlight these so you can see where we're coming from. That arrow is going up, that arrow is going down. That's how I know what's positive and what's negative. Any questions there? Flip it on over. So let's try a few more together. Looking at A, I need to start on which side? The leftmost side, right? So the leftmost side, what's that coordinate? Not -2, but -3 and 2. Where do I need to go to meet my next point? Up, and then to the right. Counting this, how far do I have to go up? By 2. How far do I have to go to the right? By 3. So what's my rise? What's my run? How do I write it together? Perfect, great job. Let's type that in. I'll tell you when. What'd y'all get? So could it simplify any further? Then that would just be it. You remember yesterday we wrote m equals over and over again? That's where that would go. So I would write your m equals on top of that so you know that that's where that is. Slope and that is the same. Probably leave him alone. He doesn't look like he's with it today. Any questions on A? Look at B for me. Where do I need to start? Leftmost point. What's my leftmost point's coordinates? Flip it. Flip your numbers. -4 and what? -1. There we go. From there, where do I need to go to get to my next point? Down. How far? Down 1, because into the next point right there. And then where? To the right 1. So that should be a what kind of 1 on the rise? -1. And what should be on the run? Not a -1, because you went to the right. So it's a +1. What's my rise? And my run? How do I write it as a fraction together? So typing that in, I'll tell you when. What y'all get? Any questions there? But notice, if I went from this point to this point, I would have went down 1, 2, 3, and then to the right, 1, 2, 3. Type in your calculator, -3 divided by 3. Did it give you the same answer? So that's why it's true. Any questions there? I feel weird saying that because you're in here, but we make it through. Okay, so looking at letter C, this one is special, and we're going to write why it's special at the top up here, okay? There's no dots that are visible to you. So we need to choose 2 lattice points. lattice points mean fall on crosshair. Now, those who play, first person shooters, things like that, Call of Duty, those kind of things, even something like The Last of Us, requires you to understand how a crosshair works because you're usually shooting something, right? So crosshairs here for us are where we see the boxes make perfect meets every time. We're looking for the points that fall on there. Does that make sense? So the best bet is to look at your y-intercept always. So I see that I have a perfect lattice point right there on that point. What point is that? 0, 0, 3. And then, do I see a lattice point directly next to it? I sure do. So from there, I can choose that point right there. Because doesn't all of those points hit perfectly on a crosshair on this line? So I ain't got to go too far, right? Does that make sense, what I mean by crosshair? I know I have some people that might not be gamers, but it's usually the gamers who get this the quickest. Because especially if you're doing anything that involves a rifle, you have to know crosshairs perfectly. So, looking there, I already said what my leftmost point was. We all said it together, so I'm going to mark it. Where do I have to go to get to my next point? Up once, and then in which direction? The right. There we go. So what is my rise? What's my run? So how do I write it as a fraction? What do you get when that simplifies? Perfect. Does that make sense? So I would circle this if you're unsure of where that comes from and say that's where this comes from. C is a special case. You will see more instances of C than anything else, especially in Algebra 1, because they're going to assume that you know what a lattice point is. Any questions? Now, these are everything on a graph. We're going to look at the tables now. Example 3, you can also find slope from a table. Rise over run just means find the change in y and find the change in x. So we can find out how the table is changing on both sides then we can find the slope. We need to find the change in y by subtracting backwards on both sides. And then always remember to simplify completely. So the way we do that is focus on one side at a time. I'm going to look at the x first, so I'm not focused on y. My first two values are between 0 and 1. The way I do this is that I take my calculator, going to take yours, and I do this piece by piece. I say 1 minus 0. Type that in. What'd you get? So that's going up by 1. Next group, 2 minus 1. And then I do 3 minus 1. Well, 3 minus 2, sorry. Because that's the next group. And that got you. And then 4 minus 3. And what'd that get you? Make sense? So what's my change in x? Just 1. Now I do the y side. I do 7 minus 5. And that gets me 2. And then I do 9 minus 7. And then I do 11 minus 9. What does that get you?
2.
And then I do 13 minus 11. And that gets you. Do you see how these are all the same? That's what makes a linear function a linear function. They have to be constant. So the change in y is what? 2. Can 2 over 1 simplify into what? There we go. And there was some vocabulary on there that y'all kind of messed up. So I'm going to help. One person got all of their vocabulary 100% right. Very proud of that person. This is delta x on this side. That's the change in x. That's the horizontal change on a graph. And this is delta y. So if you were wondering if you got it right or wrong on the test. But it was your vocabulary, no? So I hope that you would study it. Any questions there? Let's look at another example. So, what am I doing first?
X plus
1 minus 0, which gets me? What's next?
plus 2 minus
2 minus 1, that gets me? Then,
3 minus 2.
which gets me?
1.
Those who aren't typing these things in and doing it with them,
Yeah.
this is why it bites you. Don't let it bite you anymore. You got a quiz next week.
4 minus 3.
And that gets you what?
1.
So, where does that go? Top or bottom? Bottom. Now, everyone needs to be typing these in, because we struggle with negatives. You should have been typing those in, period, but you need to be typing these in. So, Kingston, you type in the first group. Matthew, you type in the second group. Denver, you type in the third group. And then, Gavin, you type in the fourth group. So, Kingston, what were you typing in?
Negative 13 minus 1.
Absolutely, what'd you get?
Negative 22.
See, negative 13 minus a negative 9. So, retype it in. You have to be careful. This is why I said everyone type it in. That's how it should be looking in your calculator. The negative does not take the place of the minus. What'd you get?
Negative 3.
There we go. Matthew, what'd you get? Well, what were you supposed to type in?
Negative 17 minus negative 13.
Absolutely. What'd you get?
Negative 4.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Denver, what were you supposed to type in? Absolutely. What'd you get? Perfect. Gavin, what were you supposed to type in?
Negative 25 minus negative 2.
Perfect. What'd you get?
Negative
Great. So, what is my delta y?
4.
So it goes on the top. Can negative 4 over 1 simplify into? Any questions there? Great, great, great.
I forgot that. 2 things.
It's okay. It's because we're still stuck in the mindset of when we see the negative, we think it's going to be our minus sign. But again, that's common. That happens even with grown people who do this for a living. That's not just you. Okay? The acknowledgement is the biggest part of this. And we can acknowledge where we went wrong, right? So we're going to be fine. You're okay. Looking at this, what's the first thing I need to do?
4 minus 2.
4 minus 2, which gets me?
2.
What's next?
6 minus 4.
Which gets me?
2.
Great. What's next?
8 minus 2.
Which gets me?
2.
And then?
10 minus 3.
Which gets me?
2.
Okay. Brandon, you type in the first group. Jordan, type in the second group. Ian, type in the third group. And Liz, type in the fourth group. Yeah, you type in the third group. So, Brandon's typing in the first one. Jordan's typing in the second. Ian's typing in the third. And Liz is typing in the fourth. All right, Brandon, what were you supposed to type in? 16 minus 10. What did that get you?
6.
All right, Jordan, what were you supposed to type in?
6 minus 4.
No. We're on the other side of the table.
Oh, the other side. Oh, 22. 28 minus 4.
No. Second group. You're doing Ian's.
22 minus 16.
Thank you. Type it in for me. Assume nothing. Type it in, please. Thank you. Ian, what were you supposed to type in? 28 minus 22, what'd you get?
6.
Perfect. Liz, what were you supposed to type in? You gotta speak a little bit louder for me, baby. I can't hear over the air. Not quite. What should come first? Ian, repeat yours one more time.
28 minus
So, what was your group supposed to start with? Not quite. Remember, where did his start? So, starting from the top. Brandon, what was your group?
16 minus 10.
Jordan, what was your group?
22 minus 16.
Ian, what was your group?
28 minus 22.
So, Liz, what is your group supposed to start with? 34. And then what's supposed to happen behind it? What was that middle part? 34 what? What operation did you say? I didn't hear you. Read what I have highlighted up top. What operation are you supposed to be doing? That's why I said read what I have highlighted up top. I don't know if you highlighted yours, but I highlighted something in pink right at the top of the screen. What operation? I'm showing you how to read. So what does it say up here? Just this word. Y'all help her. What operation are we supposed to be doing? So, Lizette, tell me again, what are we supposed to be typing in? Now that you know the word. What are you supposed to start with? No. What number? Then. By. Thank you, type it in. What'd you get? Thank you. Please be mindful, ladies and gentlemen, of knowing what you're supposed to be doing and where we are, because it takes time out of class to do this when it's something that should not be this much of a hassle. Okay? I love you, but I have to be real with you. Yes, sir. A 6, baby. It's plus 6. But if you typed it in, would you know that? What goes at the top? Thank you. What goes at the bottom? Can that simplify into what? Thank you. If you notice this number and this number, when you have something over 1, this is a special thing called a unit rate, which was also a vocabulary word. Crazy how these things keep popping up. What a wild concept. Wow. I love that for us. Any questions there? Well, you already know what's about to happen to you. Do me a favor. Do number 1 on the slope for the graphs, and do number 10 on the slope for the tables. Do number 1 and number 10. And you ain't got much time. You got about 5 minutes. Knock it out.